Good afternoon, everyone. We are now in our study in the book of Exodus. Today we are covering chapter 11. Chapter 11 is a fairly short chapter, but it is important for us to understand the context of chapter 11. Remember, chapter numberings and verse numberings are not in the original documentation, but they were added in so that we can use it for reference to locate parts of the text quite easily. And so when we are looking at chapter 11, it is important for us to then go back a little bit into the end of chapter 10 because it carries on from chapter 10 towards the end. Now, towards the end of chapter 10, we read in verse 27. Chapter 10 and in verse 27, it tells us this. And then the Lord, that is Jehovah, he hardened Pharaoh's heart. Now remember, this word here, harden, means to make strong. Make strong. And so if you understand the idea of heart, that would be the will, that would be the mind. And so when the heart or the will or the mind is strengthened, made hard, or be rigid, I think that would be an idea. You would find that this word literally means to be stubborn. It is a Eastern Oriental concept where the heart is hardened. It is about a description where the person will be obstinate, the person will be stubborn, the person will refuse to agree. Now, that is the idea. So, God made Pharaoh's heart stubborn by challenging Pharaoh, by telling Pharaoh what he ought to do, basically by making Pharaoh realize that he is smaller than God. And as the Pharaoh of the land of Egypt, he feels that he is above everything except each time when God laid a hand or touched or struck or brought a plague upon the land of Egypt, he has no response. Each of these instances is to force Pharaoh to realize that he is not an equal to Jehovah God. And here in the ninth plague, where there was a darkness that could be felt, that would be a thick fog, so thick that for 3 days they were paralyzed. They couldn't see around them. And he realized that he has sinned against God. He realized that God is not his equal. He is not capable of challenging God. But yet, when all the plagues were removed, he became even more stubborn. And it tells us in verse 27, it says, he did not let them go. Now, he would not let them go. This idea of would not literally means that he was not willing to consent. So for 9 plagues, each time, though he realizes that God is far more powerful, his magicians at home cannot help, he is still stubborn and not willing to agree to let the people go, the Hebrews. Verse 28, and then Pharaoh said to Moses, and these are the words that we will need to remember as we get into chapter 11. It says here, get away from me. The idea of get away from me means walk away from my presence. Take heed to yourself and see my face no more. Be careful that you do not come and see my face again. And Pharaoh says, for in the day you see my face, you shall die. And this is the first time that Pharaoh ever said such serious words to Moses. In verse 29, and then Moses said, and this is the reply to Pharaoh. The reply is this: you have spoken well. It's not that he speaks well, he is saying it correctly. That is true that he said. He's saying it correctly. Uh, thus is right, right? It is right. And Moses says, that is correct. I will never see your face again. Now, this word, I will never see your face again, is in the sense there is no more opportunity for Moses to come to Pharaoh. That is what it means, that I will never see your face again. There will be another instance, but in that instance, Pharaoh will come to see Moses. So, this expression here, I will never see your face again, means I will never come to your presence. Now, with that at the back of our mind, then we will continue into chapter 11. Interestingly, in chapter 11, we have 3 verses. These 3 verses were spoken to Moses while Moses was still with Pharaoh. This is important. We have Pharaoh, and Pharaoh says, go away. I do not want to see you again. The next time I see you, you will die. At the same time, we have Moses. And chapter 11 is a continuation of chapter 10. While Moses was in the company of Pharaoh, or standing there with Pharaoh, then we read these verses. In chapter 11, verse 1, it begins this way. And this would be and then. While Moses was standing there, God said to Moses, now this is the context. Jehovah said to Moses, and obviously it's in his subconscious, right? In his mind, on the mind of Moses, God said these words. God said to Moses, I will bring one more strike on Pharaoh. The word plague is strike. Now, in the modern day, strike refers to the game of baseball. 3 strikes, you are out. The idea here is to strike at Pharaoh, and God has brought 9 strikes on Pharaoh. And he says there will be one more on Pharaoh. And as it talks about Pharaoh, it is also on Egypt as a nation. And then after this strike, Pharaoh will let you go from here. Now, this word here is Pharaoh will send you away. That's the idea. The idea of let you go is to send you away from here. And as he sends you away, then it says here, he will surely drive you out of here altogether. This idea of drive you out altogether is surely drive, very definitely will expel you, chase you away. That's the whole idea. That Pharaoh cannot wait to divorce from you, cannot wait to see you depart from here. This is the way where he is so stubborn to refuse to let them go. His mind will change to the other extreme that he cannot stand to have you here. That is this phrase here, that when he lets you go or sends you away, he will actually want to expel you and don't want to see you here altogether. That will be the expression. Verse 2. Remember, it is while Moses is standing before Pharaoh, God spoke to Moses, "Speak now in the hearing of the people." Please understand that when we talk about the people, this will be the Hebrew people. It is nobody else. And let every man ask from his neighbor. So we have a man, and every woman from her neighbor. Here it says implements. These are not just articles, these are tools, these are instruments. Instruments of silver and instruments of gold. Remember, in those days, they don't carry around with a lot of money. And at the end of the day, if these instruments are made of pure silver and pure gold, it is as good as gold or silver in its value. And when it's melted down, then it can be made into something else in the form of silver and gold. So the idea here is every man and every woman can ask from his neighbor. And by neighbor, we need to remember this will be the Egyptians. You can ask from Egyptians things of silver and things of gold. And when you do that, the opposite is also something we need to understand. When you take away articles of gold and silver, you are also relieving gold and silver from the nation of Egypt. So you're transferring the instruments of silver and gold from Egypt to the Hebrew people, and they are being driven out of Egypt altogether. So these instruments of silver and gold will leave Egypt. Now, there's a second thing that we need to pay attention is that when silver and gold leaves a nation, it also means that the nation that once possessed the silver and gold no longer possess them. And when they no longer possess them, it means that they are no longer rich. And so the wealth is transferred to the Hebrew people when they leave Egypt. Why would the Egyptians do that? So we are now told in verse 3. Verse 3 says this, and then, right? And then, as God has made this prophecy, and then it is Jehovah who would give the people, and that would be the Hebrews, favor. And by favor, chen would be grace. Something that is very pleasing. That is grace. Favor means the whoever is looking at you is happy, is pleased, and then will extend favor, will extend to give you something. Now, this word in the sight of the Egyptians should read in the eyes, right? In the eyes of the Egyptian. So, grace or favor is actually seen in the eyes of the beholder. Now, it is very different from our modern day understanding of grace. In the Hebrew, it's very much like Eastern Oriental. When a child comes home to you and brings you a report card that says the child has passed his exams with flying colors, it's all A's in every subject, the child is seen with grace in your eyes. So you are looking at the child, looking at the results, and in your mind, you feel good about the child. That is the expression of grace or favor, chen. You feel good, you feel pleasurable that this child has done something that is making you happy and proud. And so this word here tells us that it is God who gave the people grace in the eyes of the Egyptians. That when the Egyptians look at the Hebrew people, they will feel good about the Hebrew people. They will want to give them things. They have favor in the eyes of the Hebrew people. They have grace in the eyes of the Egyptians. And so the Lord gave the Hebrew people grace in the eyes of the Egyptians. That is very important. If the Egyptians do not see the Hebrew people with favor or grace, they will not give the Hebrew people anything, much less articles of silver and gold, because articles of silver and gold are precious. They are worth a lot. They are money of value in the eyes of the then people, the then culture. And so, why would anyone want to give another person silver or gold? It is unheard of because silver and gold is what makes value in the home of the Egyptians. And so, this expression, and God gave the Hebrew people grace in the eyes of the Egyptians, is that when the Egyptians look at the Hebrew people, they will feel good. So, understand this, that God is not forcing the Egyptians to give out of beyond their volition. God is making it easy for the Egyptians to want to give. That is the idea here. So please don't think that God forces the free will of the Egyptians to give, but rather God has somehow made the Egyptians see the Hebrew people in a different perspective, in a different light. Now he goes on in verse 3. He says, as moreover, the man Moses was very great in the land of Egypt. Now think of it this way. This is from the word gadol. Great can be great in terms of importance. It's also great in the sense of power because he is able to call on the plagues. And so he is great and people will respect. Now, who will respect in this case? God is making such that the eyes of the Pharaoh's servant and the eyes of the people. So think of it this way. This would be the eyes of Pharaoh's servants and the eyes of the people. This would be the Hebrew people. So I guess it is important for us to realize that when Moses then speaks to the people, they will be quite willing to listen to Moses. And when Moses is sought after by Pharaoh, Pharaoh's servants would know how to find Moses. That is what verse 3 is all about. It is important for us then to be aware that this is the what we call a parenthesis, that while Moses was standing in front of Pharaoh, he is receiving this message from God. Now, we don't know exactly whether he had a pause or anything, but we are told of the content of what God said. We now come to verse 4. When it comes to verse 4 to verse 8, this is the continuation of that interaction between Pharaoh and Moses. After Moses heard from God, verse 4 is what we're told. The word here is and then. After God spoke to Moses, and then Moses said this to Pharaoh. It is not to the people, to Pharaoh. It says, thus says the Lord. This is what God says. And what is God saying? He says, about midnight. Now, this is a very good translation. This is about the middle of night. So, midnight is a good expression of the middle of the night. It says at about the middle of the night, and thus says the Lord. We're talking about God's word, and Moses is repeating this to Pharaoh. At about the middle of the night, I, Jehovah, will go out into the midst of Egypt. In verse 5, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die. The idea of die literally means come to an end. Now, the expectation of die really depends on the context. Coming to an end doesn't mean that you are going to drop dead instantly, or you're going to live for a few moments more and then you die, drop dead, or you can have a few more years to go before you drop dead. So the word die literally means to come to an end. But when will it come to an end will come from the context. So it says here, all the firstborn in the land. The firstborn in the land usually and mostly refers to the male, whether humans or animals. In the ancient Eastern culture, the firstborn is so important in the family because the firstborn son is expected to carry the name of the family, is expected to continue the lineage of the family. So God is saying that all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall come to an end. From the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on his throne, that is a reigning Pharaoh, even to the firstborn of the female servant who is behind the handmill, that would be Egyptian servants, and all the firstborn of the animals. So the common folk and even the most important Pharaoh. Now, how soon will this take place? Verse 6. When this happen, when all the firstborn shall die, there shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, which tells us this great cry literally means a cry of shrieking or distress. This is a distress cry. It is shouting out when they are at wit's end. And because this is the context that there will be a great cry, then shall die in this particular instance is quite immediate. And this is told to Pharaoh that around midnight, I, Jehovah, will go out into the midst of Egypt and I will take the life of all the firstborn and they will die. Now, understand this, when God says that he is going to let the Egyptians firstborn of both man and animals, we need to understand the principle here. When God takes a life, it is clearly a judgment. When God actively takes a life, it is a judgment. Otherwise, people will live his natural course of life, sometimes interrupted by illnesses or accidents. But generally, God doesn't interfere with the lives of humankind or the lives of animal kind. And so once we read this unusual context where God says, all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, God is going to make that call. It is an active action. And he is describing that all of these will die. And the understanding is this: such as was not like it before, nor shall be like it again. We've seen this before a few times in the plagues. This is the final plague, and God is saying, this one time that it comes, it is so unique and so great that it has never happened before, and it will never happen again. And so it's a very unique instance. Verse 7, this is the surprise. He says, against none of the children of Israel shall a dog wag its tongue against man or beast, that you may know that Jehovah does make a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. Now, this idea of make a difference, please bear in mind, this word is from the word pala, to be different, to distinguish. That God does tell one from another. This is that kind of an expression that God can separate out. Now, this whole idea that God can separate out between Egyptians and Israel is a precursor to tell us that Israel is a holy nation. Now, again, I must remind all of us, holy has nothing to do with moral. Holy is basically saying that Israel is going to be very different by the way they speak, by the way they behave, by the way they dress, by the way they eat. All of these will make Israel different. So God is doing it first. God is going to make Israel different from the Egyptians. Why? Because none of the children of Israel will be affected by this 10th plague. And all these your servants shall come down to me and bow down to me, saying, get out and all the people who follow you. Now, what does this mean? God is saying to Pharaoh, yes, I will not see you again, but your servants will come to look for me. They will bow down to me. Now, this one is a very interesting expression. This word is a cause to prostrate, prostrate, to bow down all the way to the ground. Now, what does that mean? When you bow down all the way to the ground, you are telling Moses that he is great and they who bow down is small. That is how this word bow down means. Now, oftentimes it's been translated as worship, but it's not. It's to pay reverence, to identify who is the greater and who is the smaller. And Moses is saying, your servants will come down and show me that they are smaller than me. And they will tell me your message to get out, to go out. All the people will follow me. And then Moses says, after this, after I hear you say this through your servants, I will leave. I will go out. Now, this final expression here is after he has said all these words to Pharaoh. He says, and then he went out from Pharaoh, from the presence of Pharaoh in a great anger. This idea is it is Pharaoh is in great anger and it's not Moses in great anger. In the way that the Hebrew text is structured. So I just want to clarify that when Moses, and this is Moses, when he went out from the presence of Pharaoh, he left Pharaoh in a great anger, in a burning anger, such that he cannot help himself after hearing all this, especially the last plague. Now, from verse 9 and 10, we need to understand that verse 9 and 10 is a final collective summary description of all the plagues that has happened, and the situation is such. Verse 9 says, and then the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh will not listen to you, so that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt. This is to basically reiterate that Pharaoh will not hear you. That is why the wonders or the signs, I think we can call this the signs of God, which everyone will be able to see, will be added. There will be many in the land of Egypt. Now, to date, 9 plagues. And the last one is just mentioned in verse 4 and 4 to 7. So verse 9 is very much a summary, and at the end of every plague, it was summarized that way. And this is the last time we get such a summary that God told Moses, doesn't matter. He won't listen to you, but while he doesn't listen to you, I have a chance now to show my hand that I will strike them multiple times, and in fact, 10 times. Verse 10, it says, and so Moses and Aaron did all these wonders before Pharaoh. This idea is to the faces of Pharaoh. What wonders? What are all these wonders? all the ones mentioned above. So verse 9 and 10 is actually a concluding summary of all the 9 plagues. So all of these signs, all 9 signs. But it's done already, but so it's just a concluding remark. And the summary also tells us, and the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. And again, it means strengthened in a negative way. Strengthen the will or the mind of Pharaoh such that he becomes more obstinate and more stubborn. And why was he stubborn? The demonstration of the hardening is that he did not let the children of Israel go out of his land. This idea here is did not let the children of Israel go out, is did not send away the children of Israel. But in the first 3 verses of this chapter, God says, after this, he will he will ask you to leave. And here in verse 8, it says, your servants, Pharaoh, they will come and look for me. They will bow down to me to show me that they are now smaller. And they will say, please leave, and all the people will follow you, and that will come from your mouth. After this happens, I will go out. And then he went out from the presence of Pharaoh, leaving the Pharaoh in great anger. So we have seen 2 particular prophecies. One is that Pharaoh says, I will not want to see your face again, because Pharaoh says, if I see it again, you will die. And Moses says, that is true. You have said it right. But in the second prophecy that is told to Pharaoh is this: your servants will come to look for me. They will bow down to me. They will lie down in prostrating form to me. They will tell me, please leave. All the Hebrew people should follow you. And after this prophecy is fulfilled, I will go. That is a prophecy that is to demonstrate to the Pharaoh that these simple words, though in the mind of the Pharaoh, cannot happen because he is so hardened to say, no, that's not possible. I will never tell you to leave. Well, the prophecy says you will, but you will not say it to me. You will send your people to bow down to me, to beg me to leave. And this will be the prophecy. Once it's fulfilled, then the people shall leave Egypt. We have come to an end of a major milestone. This is the beginning of the 10th plague. But the beginning of the 10th plague in chapter 12 is already stated to Pharaoh about the death of the firstborn. But chapter 12 onwards is also a beginning of a lot of details to instruct the children of Israel what to do to remember that night. Because this is the key plague that enables the children of Israel to be sent away from the presence of the land of Egypt. And with this, we come to the end of our session today.